A Texas preacher was against the COVID-19 vaccine until he got COVID. We hear his story. Plus, will the Aggies allow OU and UT into the SEC? We have the latest on an important meeting. And changes are coming to Aggieland parking. We find out the new system coming to campus. Also, Chief Meteorologist Matt Hines has the midweek forecast tonight. Will it stay as nice as it did today? Your 25 News starts right now.
Connecting the Brazos Valley. This is KRHD News.
New tonight at 10, the Texas A&M Board of Regents met in person today to discuss the potential expansion of the SEC conference. The Board of Regents voted 9-1 to allow A&M President Dr. Banks to vote yes in expanding the SEC from 14 to 16 teams, allowing University of Texas and the University of Oklahoma to join the conference. Meanwhile, the Big 12 has sent a cease and desist letter to ESPN. The letter accuses the network of actively engaging discussions with Big 12 schools to leave the conference. Reports say both UT and OU wanted out of the Big 12 because the conference would not get a better media deal than the current one with ESPN. According to The Athletic, ESPN seemed, quote, tepid about a media deal with the Big 12. And in other news, dozens of Democrats from the House of Representatives are backing Austin Representative Vicki Goodwin, who wants to give schools districts the choice to reinstate mask mandates and virtual learning. She submitted a letter addressing the concerns on July 23rd. This goes against the executive order Governor Greg Abbott signed back in May. We talked with Caldwell ISD, where they already have more teachers who've tested positive for COVID this month than this time last year. With an executive order banning government entities, including public schools, from mandating masks and no option for virtual learning, the school district feels their hands are tied.
A one-size plan that the governor just mandates out to the state of Texas does not make any sense. And it didn't make sense last year, and it doesn't make sense this year.
Since there is no state guidelines, Caldwell ISD does have its own plan, including closing down a school if COVID cases surpass more than 5% of the population. A Corsicana pastor says his fight against COVID-19 has changed his perspective on getting the vaccine. The pastor has been battling the virus for more than 20 days. He admits he was not vaccinated, but now plans to after his near-death experience. Reeves started feeling body aches and other symptoms in early July, testing positive for COVID-19 a few days later. In about a week, his breathing became so labored that he was rushed to the hospital. At one point, doctors told him he could be in danger of needing a lung transplant.
The doctor came in and said, "You're going to the ICU," and hovered over me and said that I needed to have a reality check, that I could die. I cried in here. I had emotional moments in here. I had regret in here. I recognized that I had been a bit cavalier, and that almost cost me.
He made a remarkable turnaround, crediting his faith, support from his church community, and his medical team. Reeves says his doctors helped clear up some misinformation for him, and he still is recovering, but urges everyone who doubts to talk to their doctor, someone who can separate fact from fiction. Governor Abbott signed an executive order today restricting ground transportation of migrants in Texas. Abbott says the order would help limit the spread of COVID-19. The order allows Texas DPS to stop any vehicle suspected of breaking the order and reroute it back to entry point. DPS also has the power to impound vehicles that violate the order. Back here in College Station, police have arrested the man accused of last night's shooting at John Compton Park. Officers say 21-year-old Jairus Johnson was arguing with a 16-year-old on Twitter over an ex-girlfriend. The two planned to meet at the park to fight, but officers say Johnson went to a nearby apartment complex and started shooting at people playing basketball. One person was shot in the arm and taken to an area hospital. Johnson was arrested and is in the Brazos County Jail on a $93,000 bond. Well, Texas A&M has made major changes to its on-campus parking system. Whether it be in a designated lot or garage, students and faculty will now be given access to parking via their vehicle's license plates. Starting this fall semester, parking staff will be constantly driving through these areas to scan plates using camera technology in their university vehicles. No longer will they check for a plastic element hanging over a dashboard.
We've actually been using this technology for many years to run the license plates and see if we have any overdue citations or things like that on campus.
For those parking in garages, the university will issue handheld devices that will open gates. Faculty and staff will also still have the option to open garage gates with their ID cards or toll tags. Students and faculty needing to update their plates can visit transport.tamu.edu/parking to do that now.
New research shows which hospital workers are at increased risk of catching COVID. People working the COVID wards had nearly 4 times the risk of being infected. But the research found no patient to healthcare worker transmission clusters. They were able to identify 3 possible healthcare worker to worker transmission clusters. The study suggests more consideration needs to be placed on infection prevention practices between employees. With increasing pressure for vaccine mandates for healthcare workers, there may be other simpler, effective methods to encourage employees to get the shots.
Very focused and intentional use of messaging can be helpful in encouraging vaccination, even with something as little and kind of small and as cheap as an email.
Henry Santos is a scientist on the Behavioral Insights team with Geisinger Health. It's a large health system in Pennsylvania with 8 hospitals and other clinics and just under 30,000 employees. Back in January, when healthcare workers were first eligible for the vaccine, the health system sent 36 general emails over 5 weeks informing staff that they could register. At the time, only 41% of employees had. Then the Insights team tailored 2 specific emails with different principles of behavior science. One focused on social norms, pointing out how many other people had gotten the vaccine. The other email focused on the risk of vaccine side effects versus possible complications from getting the virus. They found both emails were equally effective at boosting vaccine registration among staff by more than 3%.
So we think that we went on top of that by really carefully tailoring the message to encourage people, to kind of give them the pieces of information that they need to make this decision.
The 2 more specifically crafted emails were also personally addressed. They came from a trusted source of authority, the Chief of Infectious Diseases, and they had a sense of urgency at the time, pointing out vaccines would soon be available to more people. Now, Santos says this method can be easily replicated. Only 70% of Geisinger health staff are vaccinated today. Well, still ahead in our lineup, doctors have less than 2 days to complete an organ transplant. How changing commercial flight schedules could make this process easier.
Over a dozen people were rescued from a possible human trafficking ring. Coming up, find out where this is, and we hear from officers about the conditions inside. 19 people were found in a Houston apartment in what police believe to be a human smuggling investigation. All were adults except for 1 teenager, and they are all in good medical condition. The person who leased the apartment less than a month ago was not on the premises, and no arrest had been made.
And as it turns out, there at this time, 19 people in a very small 1-bedroom apartment, deplorable conditions inside, no furniture at all.
If you suspect anything suspicious in regards to human trafficking, please call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888. Text them at 233-733 or submit a tip online at humantraffickinghotline.org. Well, Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson has been accused of sexual misconduct by 10 women. Deshaun Watson's attorney, Rusty Hardin, confirmed that 10 women have filed criminal complaints with the Houston Police Department. 8 of the women have filed civil suits. Watson is currently facing more than 20 civil lawsuits accusing him of sexual assault or sexual misconduct. The Harris County District Attorney's Office confirmed there still have not been any charges filed against Watson. Now let's get a check of the weather with First Alert Chief Meteorologist Matt Hines.
And we did see a few clouds across the area today and an isolated storm or two, mainly across our far northwestern areas, but most of us didn't see much at all. And it's still muggy out there. Temperatures upper 80s. Look at that. Still feels like the 90s, though, with south-southeast winds at 6 miles per hour. It is a muggy night here across the Brazos Valley. Clouds and radar showing that, well, not much happened here. There were showers and thunderstorms to the east of us and to the north, but as they tried to meander their way down to the south, well, it just didn't make it here. We were kind of in a little hole across our part of the region as other showers and thunderstorms developed here with a little disturbance. You can see a little spin right here across southwest Texas. That continues to back up to the west, though. It's going to bring us some onshore flow the next couple of days, but only isolated thunderstorms are anticipated with that. So taking a look at your future track, things will be quiet for the rest of the overnight hours. By 7 o'clock in the morning, partly cloudy skies. And then notice a few isolated thunderstorms will be possible tomorrow afternoon. Keep the umbrella in the backseat just in case one of those comes through, but it won't last very long at any one location, even if it rains at all. Then as we head into Friday, more of the same, maybe a few isolated thunderstorms here and there, but rain chances running about 20% the next couple of afternoons. So not a lot, but at least some folks may get lucky out there. Temperatures into the 70s tonight, go right around 77 degrees for Hearn, 78 Bryan College Station, 75 in Madisonville. And then as we head into tomorrow, we will have highs in the mid 90s, but it will feel like it's above 100 when you factor in that humidity. So definitely quite warm across the region, and your 10-day forecast showing 95, 96 degrees over the next couple of days. There's your isolated storm chances as well. Saturday and Sunday look pretty hot, highs in the upper 90s, feeling like over 100 again, maybe a slight chance of a storm here on Sunday. Then we get to Monday. I think that's our next best chance of some scattered showers and thunderstorms, highs in the mid 90s, and then we'll slowly taper that off through the middle part of the next week.
Timing is everything when it comes to organ transplants. Doctors have 24 to 36 hours to transplant an organ, depending on the type of organ. And that can be tough to do when an organ is being transported from one part of the country to the next. That's why researchers at the University of Texas say offering more direct flights would help save more lives. Organs are usually transported on commercial flights if they're being taken to a far location. But researchers say time can make it more difficult to get an organ to someone who really needs it.
There seems to be a mismatch between the supply and demand, and we believe one of the big reasons is that the supply just cannot reach the demand in time.
Researchers estimate about 5,000 people die every year waiting for a kidney transplant, and 3,500 kidneys are discarded because they're no longer usable. Researchers at the University of Texas looked at airline data and found the introduction of just one new flight can increase the number of kidney transplants by more than 7%. After routes were cut during the pandemic, researchers say there should be a minimum requirement of direct flights across different regions.
This also creates an opportunity for policymakers, right, to guide the recovery of these airline industries, and they can hopefully find a way to shape the U.S. airline networks and in turn make the U.S. organ transportation system more equitable.
Researchers found that more flights during the daytime and during the week increases the opportunity to transplant and transport an organ. As the CDC adds new mask recommendations with the Delta variant spreading, some people recovering from addiction are worried about what comes next. Coming up next in our lineup, how drug and alcohol treatment counselors are working to prevent relapses from starting again. A growing number of historically black colleges and universities are clearing student account balances so they can finish or continue school. Clark Atlanta University is one of the latest to do this for the 2020 and 2021 semesters. They're using federal funding from the CARES Act. Nearly a dozen other HBCUs have made similar moves, according to a tally by the United Negro College Fund shared with the Wall Street Journal. Well, you may have a family member going through this right now. The hot housing market and changes during the pandemic are making apartments unaffordable for college students looking for places to live this fall. 34% of college students say they can't afford rent in their own college town. That's according to a new survey out today from Realtor.com.
Due to remote work, due to affordability, and just as importantly, due to quality of life. All these factors, which have caused many people to move from coastal big cities, are now making it very difficult for students to find an affordable place.
Realtor.com economists say with everyone from retirees to remote workers moving to college towns, supply, which was already an issue, will continue to get worse. Students are facing lots of competition and having to look at multiple places to find a spot.
Even in the local market, there are limited opportunities. When we look at construction, particularly for apartments or homes over the last 10 years, we are severely undersupplied. And this is not, particular to any geography, rather it's widespread. So I would say that for the time being, the challenges will remain well into this fall semester.
The median national rent price in June was at more than $1,500. That's about 8% higher than a year ago.
Larger units tend to have rents that are up considerably more. Why I say that, that's relevant, because for many college students, they're not necessarily going to look at a studio or even a one-bedroom. Many times they will take 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom homes, even 4-bedrooms sometimes, and just take on extra roommates. And it's those very units which have gone up tremendously in the past year.
For a 2-bedroom apartment, for example, the cost was around $180 extra this June compared to a year ago. 19% of students in the survey say their parents are either helping them pay rent this year when they didn't need it last year. Others are choosing to move home to save money. The Delta variant has people worried about what COVID restrictions could return. Among those concerns are those who work in addiction recovery. Forrest Sanders is looking into the effort to prevent relapses from starting again if more uncertain times are ahead.
I always had this idea that if you had an office, that was the sign you had made it.
Now that Yolanda Manus has office space, is that how she feels?
No, that's when the work really begins. But I did put some things in that brought joy to my spirit.
And Yolanda's favorite is this, a little picture by her niece Paige of different kinds of women, all queens. To know why this picture means so much, you have to know Yolanda's story.
I grew up in a very rural community. I grew up in a very dysfunctional home that led into methamphetamine use.
Yolanda felt her addiction had become so deep, there was no way of getting through it to the other side.
I literally had no home, really no friends. My body was completely being destroyed. I thought, this is your life.
But changing course, Yolanda arrived to Mending Hearts, a Nashville-based residential treatment service for women.
I wanted you guys to come in with 3 items that show me that you're not the person you were in your addiction.
I brought my alarm clock because I have a routine now.
And it's at Mending Hearts, Yolanda today has that little office with that special picture from a niece, where she now works as Associate Clinical Director. But Yolanda has a new worry. Downtowns across the country are full again. It's so different now from how it all was. In April 2020, a time when the pandemic left businesses locked up and city streets quiet, when the country was under stay-at-home orders, stress, anxiety, and depression spiked, and by June 2020, the CDC reported 13% of Americans were starting or increasing substance abuse. Mending Hearts did what they had to do, holding their recovery meetings through Zoom. But Yolanda says she knows from her experience the importance of in-person meetings.
For a person in early recovery, the opposite of addiction is connection.
Though the meetings are back in person now, Mending Hearts is watching as the CDC again recommends masks indoors in high transmission areas, reporting the Delta variant is now making up 83% of all new COVID cases.
More than anything that I've heard from them is, are they going to shut our meetings down?
We can't pray that it not come. We have to think that it's coming.
Trina Frierson is the founder and CEO of Mending Hearts. She says in fighting relapses as numbers rise for the Delta variant, she's working closely with medical centers for guidance.
We have the ability to test on site. We have the ability to vaccinate our women here.
And Yolanda says there's a key thing to be taught to anyone in recovery.
Hey, we've already been through something. you'll get through it. You've already got evidence you can.
It's that importance of connection in this time that's bringing so many to this bridge for National Women Touched by Addiction Day. These are people who have lived with addiction, people who love someone who lived with addiction.
Recovery ain't for the punks, right? When you get clean, you reach back and you help somebody else.
And perhaps going into more uncertain times in the pandemic, Yolanda says she's grateful for a special picture in her office and for the artist niece standing with her today. With people there for support, Yolanda believes no matter how deep the addiction, there's a bridge to cross it.
The secret is out. Guess what? We do recover, right? I love you guys.
In Nashville, Tennessee, I'm Forrest Sanders.
Forrest, thank you for that report. Well, finally in our lineup, so many office buildings are sitting empty now as companies decide not to return. How an idea to turn these buildings into housing instead would work. Office buildings across the country are sitting empty. Vacancy rates in major cities have gone up since last year and more than doubled since 2019 in places like San Francisco. That's according to the commercial real estate firm Avison Young. Los Angeles is at an all-time high of almost 18% vacancy, and Houston has reached a record high of nearly 23%. The overall national rate is 17%. Now the question is what to do with these buildings.
Given that we have a housing shortage, the natural thought would be to see if there could be some conversion of empty office spaces into housing units.
Dr. Yun with the National Association of Realtors says although this would be the most logical route to take, it's not an easy process to convert an office building into housing. So the chances of the housing being affordable is low without some sort of government help.
Sometimes the numbers simply do not work after considering all the costs that is involved. And that is why it is important to have a tax credit for the developers or possible extra funding.
The only thing that wouldn't really need to be changed here is parking. To convert these office buildings into housing, interiors would have to be completely redone and a lot more bathrooms would need to be installed. Dr. Yun says empty office buildings are typically leased to a new business to use. But with many companies making work from home permanent, that's not really happening. In the past, office buildings have rarely been turned into housing, but with these factors in place, it could be more of a possibility. Well, a single shot to nerves in the neck has been used for years to reduce and eliminate pain. Tomorrow, how the same treatment is working and showing promising signs for treating PTSD, but the roadblocks some face when it comes to who pays.
Jimmy Kimmel is up next. Good Morning Texas is on the air tomorrow at 5 a.m. Thanks for joining us.